Hello and welcome to the Starting Thousand Suns series, the series where we go from your first purchase to your first 2,000 point army list and everything in between for the chaos forces of the Thousand Suns. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a couple of 500 point lists, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth than we would in other lists when looking at some of the choices, because this is kind of the preliminary video. The first list we're going to look at is going to be a list built out of the contents of a combat patrol box, and the second list is going to be one that I think is a bit of an alternative to what the combat patrol has to offer. This way you get a few different options, and you can make a more informed decision in terms of which one you want to pursue. That's not to say these are your only options, it's just a couple that I wish to present here, so do keep in mind there are many ways to start a Warhammer 40k army. Let's start with our first list for this video, which will be a list built out of the combat patrol box. And with this list, we'll start off with the Cult of Time, and if you're interested in learning more about the great cults of the Thousand Suns, please see the link in the description for the video I did specifically on those. Anyway, with that being said, this will be a patrol detachment so that you can play within a combat patrol game. The list begins with an HQ choice, as all patrol detachments must, and this HQ choice is an Infernal Master. The Infernal Master is actually a pretty decent HQ choice, coming in at 90 points, which is a little bit pricey. However, he does come with a 6-inch movement, which is rather standard for most walking units, and he has a respectable toughness of 4, 4 wounds, and a 3+ normal save, as well as a 5+ invulnerable save, thanks to being an Arcane Astartes and being part of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, which are granted to detachments of Thousand Suns in a purely Thousand Suns army. And following that in terms of durability, he has the Armor of Contempt special rules, which reduces enemy armor penetration by 1 point unless he's benefiting from other rules that would reduce the enemy's armor penetration characteristic or other specific cases. This is a global rule and not one that is found within the Thousand Suns Codex, so it is something you have to consult the data slate for, which unfortunately makes it a little bit harder to keep track of, though do keep in mind you do want to keep up to date with things like the data slate and the FAQ changes. As for his offensive capabilities, he does have a 3+ weapon and ballistic skill, as well as being armed with an Inferno pistol and grenades for his range attacks. For melee, even though he's a sorcerer, he is no slouch, for he comes armed with a 4 stave, and that allows him to make 4 attacks with a strength of 7, 1 armor penetration, and D3 damage. This can really surprise some people within close combat, as it's sometimes unexpected for a caster model to have such a powerful melee profile, though it's one that's becoming more and more common with power armor units, so it's one that will probably be a little less surprising to some of your opponents. Now, what else does the Infernal Master bring to the table? Well, he's a bit special in that he's both a Psyker, and he has a set of special abilities unique to himself, known as Infernal Pacts, which function as a bit of a pseudo-psychic power that he can only use. In addition to that, because he is a psychic character, he does have access to Kabbalistic rituals, which we covered in the special rules video for the Thousand Suns. I'll leave a link in the description to that as well if you wish to learn more about the Kabbalistic powers. As for his psychic abilities, he knows 1 psychic power in addition to Smite and whatever great cult psychic power that he has. He can cast 1 psychic power a turn, and he can attempt to deny 1 psychic power a turn. For the psychic power in this situation, we decided to go with Glamour of Tzeentch. This psychic power allows him to choose a friendly Thousand Suns unit within 18 inches, and enemies have -1 to hit when targeting that unit. This can definitely help the durability of some units, and as we'll see with this list, you will be kind of banking on one unit doing the majority of the work. In terms of his Infernal Pacts, the way the Infernal Pacts works is that he knows 2 different Infernal Pacts, and in your command phase, he can attempt to manifest one of those Infernal Pacts. To manifest an Infernal Pact, he chooses one of the pacts and then rolls a d6. On a roll of 3+, the pact is manifested successfully, and whatever effect that pact has goes off. However, he does have access to a special stratagem known as Malignant Pact. And what Malignant Pact does is if he fails to manifest his Infernal Pact, you can spend 1 command point and select a friendly infantry or cavalry unit within 6 inches and deal 1 mortal wound to that unit in order to automatically pass that Infernal Pact check and have that Infernal Pact go off successfully. So let's take a look at what the Infernal Pacts we have chosen for the Infernal Master. The first of these Infernal Pacts is the Glimpse of Eternity. The Glimpse of Eternity is a very interesting Infernal Pact, and what it does is it says you can reroll a single dice roll until your next command phase. This definitely lets you smooth out some of your rolls, and in a small game like this, it's even more impactful. Not only that, but normally you have to pay a command point in order to have a reroll, which does come into play rather often depending on what you're using. As for the second Infernal Pact, if you don't want a single reroll, you can choose to go with Malefic Maelstrom. And Malefic Maelstrom gives +1 strength to the range attack of a friendly unit within 24 inches and visible to the Infernal Master manifesting this Infernal Pact. This allows him to kind of buff a unit, and once again, we're pretty much going to be depending on a unit of Scarab Occult Terminators within this army list because of the contents of the Combat Patrol. In addition to all of this, we've decided to give this Infernal Master a trait and a relic as he is our Warlord. For the trait, we've given him the Seeker After Shadows trait, and this allows him to roll an additional d6 when making a psychic action roll and discard one of the d6 of your choice. This gives you a little bit more ability to make psychic actions. However, the real reason we've chosen this trait is because it generates an additional Cabal point. And as you will see with this list, if you do not take this trait, you'll only have 3 Cabal points total, which gives you access to a total of 1 Cabal ability, and by getting that additional Cabal point, you give yourself access to 3 additional Cabal powers, so it does give you more flexibility when playing this list. I do think it's definitely worth it because it does give you so many more options. As for the relic, we've given him a rather powerful one, which is Elahane's Orrery, and this Orrery gives him an ability to select an enemy unit invisible to the bearer, and that enemy unit gains the Fate of Doom aura. And Thousand Suns core units within 6 inches of that unit ignore all weapon skill, ballistic skill, hit, and wound modifiers when targeting that unit. Not only that, but they also ignore any damage reduction abilities that unit might have. This can really ruin some enemies' days, considering how much ability it gives you to essentially target that unit without being hampered by any of its abilities, and even overcome some of the special rules some armies have that allow them to reduce damage. This is a very powerful option, and I think it's a very powerful relic in general that sees plenty of play within Thousand Suns armies. And with that being said, that concludes the coverage of the Infernal Master. As you can see, the Infernal Master has a ton of things going on, and it's definitely a unit that's kind of hard to master, especially as a new player, because not only are you learning all the psychic abilities that he has, but you're also looking at the different Infernal packs that he offers. In any case, don't feel restricted to the different options I've chosen for him in this situation, but rather feel free to experiment with different options you may think are interesting. Now moving along, we come to a troop choice of this patrol detachment. This troop choice will be composed of a single unit of 20 Zangors. Normally would want to break up this unit into 2 units of 10 Zangors, however the Zangors do have a limitation that you're only allowed to have 1 unit of Zangors for every unit of Rubrics or Terminators within your army. And because the Combat Patrol box only includes 1 unit of Terminators, you are restricted in terms of how you can play these Zangors. Each Zangor model costs a total of 7 points, and has a rather decent profile of a 6-inch movement, a toughness of 4, 1 wound, and a 6+ normal save. However, they do gain a 5+ invulnerable save thanks to being part of the Brotherhood of Sorcerers. They also have a rather low leadership of 6, and they do not benefit from Armor of Contempt. This does make them a rather fragile unit, as you are pretty much depending on that 5+ invulnerable save to keep them alive. Though that being said, at 7 points, they're not the worst model in the world, and they do see some play in small numbers, usually in units of 10 as alternatives to cultists, though they are a bit of a niche unit considering how good some of your other units are within the Thousand Suns. I should also mention that the Zangor units themselves do not offer Cabal points, which does hurt your ability to use them in certain situations. They do have 2 different armament options, being an auto pistol and a chainsword, or Zangor blades. Generally, you're going to want the Zangor blades as the auto pistol and chainsword are rather weak, and their stat profile is weak enough that it doesn't really benefit you to take those options. However, at least the blades give you some options within melee combat. The Zangor blades offer them 2 attacks total per model, with 3 on the squad leader known as a Twisted Bray. These attacks are made at strength 4, 1 armor penetration, and 1 damage. That's not the worst profile in the world, and they can definitely do some damage in big enough numbers. In this situation, we've given the Zangors 2 different upgrades, being a Bray Horn, which gives them +1 to their advance and charge rolls at the cost of 10 points, and a Herd Banner, which allows them to roll morale tests, and considering they have a low leadership of 6, this definitely benefits them rather heavily in such a large unit and only costs 5 points. However, in most situations, you're not really going to want to invest the points in these options, and really the only reason we're giving them these options in this situation is mostly because we don't have many options to go within this list, and as you will see at the end of it, we don't actually hit 500 points, so we do have some points to spend around, and this is just a way of eating up some extra points that are left over at the end. And before we conclude looking at the Zangor unit, there is one special stratagem they have access to, which is Inhuman Savagery. Inhuman Savagery costs 2 command points total, and it allows you to roll the hit roll in the fight phase. This could come in handy, but it is rather expensive for what the Zangors have to offer, and generally you're only going to use this in very specific situations where it's incredibly critical that you get those extra attacks to hit. Usually you're not going to worry about it too much, and all in all, I'll say the Zangors aren't particularly impressive units, though they're not the worst ones in the world either. I will say I wish the Combat Patrol box included something else, maybe a unit of rubrics instead of the Zangors, as at least that would be a little more interesting, though I do understand why they include this, as it's an easy and cheap way of getting the Zangors with the upgrade sprues. That being said, do keep in mind that unlike the Poxwalkers for the Death Guard, the Zangors are a lot more expensive and a lot more cumbersome to utilize. Think about it this way, a Zangor is 2 points more expensive than a Poxwalker, meaning that a unit of 20 Zangors costs 40 points more than a unit of 20 Poxwalkers. And while the Zangors are faster and have a bit of a better stat profile, the Poxwalkers do have the ability to put out a lot of mortal wounds and do have the ability to be a lot more annoying to your opponent than the Zangors. So as such, I would definitely say the Poxwalkers are definitely a better choice, and you do get a lot more Poxwalkers within the Death Guard Combat Patrol than you do Zangors within the Thousand Suns Combat Patrol. Really, I would say the Thousand Suns Combat Patrol does lack a lot in comparison to something like the Death Guard option. In any case, let's continue on with looking at this list. The final unit in this list is going to be kind of the power unit and the unit that's going to do the most work within this army, and that is a unit of 5 Scarab called Terminators. Each of these Terminators costs a total of 40 points, and they have a rather impressive stat profile like many of the Chaos Terminators do. They do have a bit of a slow movement profile with a 5-inch movement. They do have access to Teleport Strike, which allows them to deep strike into the game, and does give them a lot of ability to position very well. They do have a rather low toughness for a Terminator, only having a toughness of 4. However, each Terminator has 3 wounds and a 2+ normal save, as well as a 5+ invulnerable save, thanks to their Terminator armor. They also benefit from Armor of Contempt, and they benefit from a special ability known as Arcane Automata, which means they pass all morale tests. They even have another special ability, which is actually significantly powerful, known as All Is Dust. All Is Dust gives them +1 to their saving throw whenever a weapon with a damage characteristic of 1 is attributed to them. And in addition to that, they suffer no penalty to their hit roll for moving and shooting with their heavy weapons, which definitely is beneficial to their ability to put out firepower. And speaking of firepower, they do have the Malicious Volley special ability, which says that because they are within Terminator armor, they always consider to have double the number of attacks for rapid-fire weapons. This means every time you see a rapid-fire weapon that is also a bolt weapon for them, you double the number of attacks, so they're always considered to be within rapid-fire range for those attacks, which is an exceptionally powerful ability on them, considering that they have a ballistic skill of 3, and their Inferno Combat Bolters are much better than the normal combat bolters of other units. Like normal combat bolters, they have a 24-inch range and a rapid-fire profile of 2, which means each Terminator is going to be making 4 attacks total with each of their combat bolters. However, unlike normal combat bolters, they do have an armor penetration characteristic of 2, compared to a normal armor penetration characteristic of 0 that is significantly improved. They still only have a damage characteristic of 1, though with that additional armor penetration, it's far more likely that damage goes through. We did choose to give these Terminators some special weapons, the first one being a Soul Reaper Cannon, which costs a total of 5 points for the upgrade, and replaces a Combat Bolter with a 24-inch range, 5 heavy shots at a strength of 6, 3 armor penetration, and 1 damage per shot. This is a very powerful weapon, and for only 5 points total, I definitely recommend taking this anytime you have the ability to take one. You're only allowed 1 per 5 Terminator models, so you won't be able to take another one until you expand up to 10 models. The other upgrade we've taken is the Hellfire Missile Rack, and the Hellfire Missile Rack costs a total of 10 points and does not replace any of their war gear, so it's only in addition to and not a replacement of. The Hellfire Missile Rack has a 36-inch range with 2 heavy shots and a strength of 8. It has an armor penetration characteristic of 2 and a damage profile of 3. This can hit rather hard, and this really does up their ability to shoot enemies down from a range. Don't forget the different buffs that the Infernal Master can give them, and all of a sudden you can do quite a lot of damage to the different enemies that you're targeting. And if they happen to be collapsed upon in melee, they're no slouches there either, as they have a weapon skill of 3+, and they have 3 attacks each. They'll be making those attacks with their Prosper Kopeshes, which have a strength of 5 total, 3 armor penetration, and 2 damage each. They're essentially souped up power swords, so anything that's going to be engaging in them is going to be suffering a lot of damage, even within melee combat, so they're definitely a very versatile unit. Now we have a few other things to consider with this unit, such as the fact that the champion of this unit is a sorcerer, and the champion of this unit is allowed to know 1 psychic power in addition to his smite and cold power. He can cast 1 psychic power a turn and attempt to deny 1 psychic power. The psychic power we've chosen to give him is Empiric Guidance, and this allows him to select a friendly Thousand Sun unit within 12 inches of him and add 6 inches to the range of all rapid fire and heavy weapons within that squad. As you can see, all of the weapons within the Terminator squad are rapid fire or heavy weapons, so he extends the range of all of their weapons and he can cast it on his own unit. This means their threat range is dramatically increased, and with the potential additional strength and other benefits of the Malefic Master and the traits and relics that he's been offered, the Terminators can definitely do a lot of work, and that's very important to consider, considering they're going to be your main output unit for this army. We've also decided to give them one of the Legion commands, which is Rites of Coalescence. And Rites of Coalescence, as we've covered before, says that in your command phase, you can regain all of the lost wounds on a model within that unit. This means that they're already incredibly durable, they can regain their lost wounds, and the Cult of Time allows them to even resurrect models within that unit. This way you're making your unit very durable and have incredible output so that it's very hard for your opponent to deal with that power unit. You are kind of all in on that unit, though the Sangors can do some work on their own, and the Infernal Master is no slouch either. And don't forget, the Rubrics and Terminators have a special stratagem known as Unwavering Phalanx. Unwavering Phalanx costs between 1 and 3 command points, costing 1 command point if a unit contains 5 or less models, and costing 3 command points if it contains more than 5 models. And what this stratagem does is it reduces the damage characteristic of incoming damage by 1 to a minimum of 1. This does further add to the durability of those Terminators, and you have even more options if you want to pursue them with the different psychic powers to give them even more durability. That might be something you want to consider with the Infernal Master in order to make your Terminators even more durable. In any case, this list comes out to a total of 470 points and generates a total of 4 Cabal points. The cost of this list would be a total of $150, assuming that you're not getting any discounts, though you can find many places where you can get a 15% discount from various retailers, as many of them will offer something of that nature. The kits needed for this army build is obviously just that one combat patrol box. Though that being said, I do think it's a bit of a limited style of play, considering you're pretty much locked into building this specific army, as you don't have really many other ways of building it outside of which psychic powers, infernal packs, and relics and traits you choose. And you're already falling short of that 500 points, even though you're taking things like those upgrades on the Brave Shamans in order to kind of eat up as many points as you can. I do think the Combat Patrol for the Thousand Suns is a bit weaker than that of something like the Death Guard and many other options out there. As such, I do think there's an alternative list. So now that we've taken a look at the Combat Patrol box, let's take a look at the list that I think is comparable in price and a lot more fun to play, at least in my opinion. This list is once again a patrol detachment, and it'll begin with the Cult of Duplicity. Though I should mention at this point level, the cults you select does not really change how you play your list, and you can really go with any of the cults for either of these two lists as you prefer them. In any case, I just chose the top 2 cults because they're the easiest to explain and the ones that'll give you the most power overall. If anything, I would say the Cult of Duplicity is probably a little weaker in a 500 point game because you have less of a selection of units to teleport around than you would in a larger scale game. Though that being said, I'm sure you can find many uses for it in many situations even at this point level. However, this might be a good opportunity for you to try out other cults and see how you like them. Anyway, this list begins with an HQ detachment as the last patrol detachment did. However, instead of an Infernal Master this time around, we've gone with a Demon Prince. This Demon Prince is the warlord of your army. He's been given a trait and a relic, and let's take a quick look at what the stats of the Demon Prince are. The Demon Prince starts off at 140 points. We give him a Hellforged sword, which costs another 10 points, and then we threw a pair of wings on him for 35 points, meaning he is a total of 185 points. While the sword is a rather standard option and one of the melee weapons you have to choose from, the wings are definitely a good option as well, and they increase his mobility up to 12 inches and give him the fly keyword. This is very useful as it lets him get within combat, and the Demon Prince is very much a melee unit. Though before we go into his offensive profile, let's take a look at his defensive profile. The Demon Prince comes with a toughness of 6, 8 wounds, a 3+ normal save, and a 4+ invulnerable save due to his demonic stature. In addition to that, he does benefit from the Armor of Contempt rules, which does give him all the more durability. And as we want him to be especially durable and a melee monster, we've given him the trait of Undying Form. An Undying Form reduces the damage he takes by 1 to a minimum of 1. This means he can go toe-to-toe with many characters and survive pretty effectively. Though we wanted to go one step further and give him the Conniving Plate as a relic. The Conniving Plate is an incredible relic that gives him a 2+ base save and has a rather unique ability which says that enemies can only allocate half of their attacks rounded up to this model within melee combat. This means that essentially every enemy is fighting at half strength when going against the Demon Prince. This makes him especially effective of fighting against enemy characters, especially when combined with the Undying Form and his natural durability, and as such he's going to be an incredible beast on the table. The durability alone does not make him a beast, so let's take a look at his melee profile as he does not have any shooting attacks. For a melee profile he has 5 base attacks and a weapon skill of 2. His Hellforged Sword gives him a strength of 8, 3 armor penetration, and 3 damage, meaning that he'll be hitting incredibly hard. In addition to that, he even makes an extra attack with his Malefic Talents at a strength of 7, 1 armor penetration, and 2 damage. Sure, it's not quite as good as the sword, but hey, it's a free attack that just piles on the damage and isn't bad in itself. Now, as this is a Demon Prince, he is a Psyker, and being a Psyker, he does have access to the Kabbalistic rituals as well as psychic powers. The Demon Prince knows 2 different psychic powers in addition to his cult power and the Smite psychic power. As such, he can manifest 2 powers within a turn and attempt to deny 1 power a turn. For his psychic powers, we decided to play into the melee threat aspect. As such, we gave him Swelled by the Warp, which allows him to select a friendly unit within 12 inches, and that unit gains +2 strength as well as +1 attack until your next psychic phase. This definitely will take him to another level, and that extra attack from the Hellforged Sword, as well as additional 2 strength, potentially bring him to a new breakpoint against your enemy's toughness. For the second psychic power, we gave him Twist of Fate. Twist of Fate allows him to select an enemy unit within 12 inches and make it so that unit cannot use any invulnerable saves until your next psychic phase. This is a very powerful ability, which essentially means his attacks will almost function like mortal wounds in a sense, and it means his attacks will pretty much be cleaving through anything they target. Because of his high armor penetration and the ability to ignore invulnerable saves, the opponent will have to depend on Feel No Pain saves. Inversely, you can target a different unit with Twist of Fate, and then allow your shooting units to take care of that unit while the Demon Prince goes into combat with something else. So there are quite a lot of different ways of playing these different psychic powers. Now, he has one other special ability, which is Lord of the Thousand Suns. This is an ability that functions as an aura, and functions pretty much like any other Lord ability out there, which just says core units within 6 inches can reroll a hit roll of 1 when making attacks. So it's a rather standard Lord style ability, though it does help buff units and give your units a little extra bit to make their attacks more impactful. In any case, the Demon Prince is a large model that's rather cool and can play rather well in other Chaos armies, as most Chaos armies will enjoy having a Demon Prince as one of their HQ choices. I should mention that you're only allowed 1 Demon Prince per detachment, as Demon Princes have a special keyword that basically says they're a jealous tyrant, and whether you're playing Death Guard or Thousand Suns, you have to have multiple detachments if you want multiple Demon Princes. Moving on to the troop choice of this patrol detachment, we've decided to go with 2 troop choices, each of them being composed of 5 Rubric Marines. The Rubric Marines are actually a rather powerful troop choice and can do quite a lot of work. They're definitely a lot more beneficial to an army list than a unit of Zangors, and as such, I think you're going to find a lot of use for them. In fact, you'll probably be using several units of Rubric Marines within any list that you build. Each Rubric Marine comes in at 20 points a model, and has a rather decent profile with a 6-inch movement, a toughness of 4, 2 wounds per model like most Marines do nowadays, a 3+ normal save, and a 5+ invulnerable save thanks to their Brotherhood of Sorcerers ability. They also benefit from Armor of Contempt, as well as All Is Dust and Arcane Automaton, as discussed with the Terminators of the previous list. And like the Terminators, they also have a decent weapon skill ballistic skill of 3+, as well as being armed with Inferno bolt guns. These aren't quite as good as the combat Inferno bolters, but like them, they also have the stats of a basic bolter, having a 24-inch range, a rapid fire of 1 profile, a strength of 4, and 1 damage. However, like a normal bolter which has 0 armor penetration, these have an armor penetration of 2, making them that much more devastating. Don't forget that the rubrics also benefit from Malicious Volley. However, unlike Terminators, they do have to have a little bit of a different condition, which says that they must remain stationary in order to benefit from the double attacks, instead of always gaining it like Terminators do. Now for both these units, we've chosen to go with the same upgrades pretty much, being a Soul Reaper Cannon which costs 5 points and has the same stats as the one that the Terminators carry, and once again, you'll pretty much want to max out on these anytime you can, as they just have a really good profile. We've also given each of these units an Icon of Flame, and right now it seems like the Icon of Flame is free, so there's really no reason not to take it, and all it really does is it gives you 1 additional Cabal point for the unit, meaning that your unit generates a total of 2 Cabal points. This is a nice benefit to have, and definitely increases the number of Cabal points you can generate within a turn. And just like the Terminators, the squad leader of each of these squads is a sorcerer, so he does have the ability to cast psychic powers and knows 1 psychic power in addition to Smite and the Cult psychic power. He can manifest 1 power and attempt to deny 1 power. In this situation, for the psychic power that each of these squads knows, we went with a different psychic power. For the first squad, we went with a Weaver of Fate psychic power, which says that when manifested, a friendly unit within 18 inches gains a 4+ invulnerable save. This is great on Marines, but it'll be also really good on other units within this list. For the second squad, we went with a more offensive psychic power, in this case being the Doombolt psychic power. This says that the closest enemy within 18 inches and visible to the caster suffers 3 mortal wounds, pretty much being an alternative to a smite, but automatically dealing the max number of mortal wounds. And with the Cult of Duplicity's psychic power, you can use one squad to teleport the other next to an enemy and then utilize Doombolt to its full effect. This can actually allow you to do some interesting tricks and really catch an opponent off guard. Then you can unload on them with those Infernal Bolters and the Soul Reaper Cannon, both of which have a rather good profile, and I'll say the Infernal Bolters are really good considering the points cost of the Marines themselves. There's a couple of stratagems we should discuss for the Rubric Marines. The first is the Unwavering Phalanx, which is the same as the Terminators have within the first list, and it does help their durability out a little bit. Though in some cases it might not matter at all, they'll definitely help you do a lot of work against enemies that have damage to weapons. Now, while the Marines have access to quite a lot of different stratagems, there's one I wanted to mention here specifically, which is the Slow and Purposeful stratagem. For one command point, when you use this stratagem, the selected squad counts as remaining stationary for the turn even if they've moved. Remember that Malicious Volley ability? This is definitely a stratagem that works rather well with that Malicious Volley and can really let you take full advantage of those double shots. This is better when you're using a larger squad, such as a squad of 10 Rubric Marines. Though in this situation, because of the limited points and the desire to keep costs low, we've gone with 2 squads of 5, and the reason for this is because that gives us a second sorcerer, which gives us more Cabal points and gives us additional ability to cast an additional psychic power. Had this been a 2,000 point list, I would have rather gone with units of 10 Rubric Marines instead of units of 5 Rubric Marines. However, because of the restraints at this point level, I do like the idea of breaking up the units. Though in bigger games, I would suggest units of 10 and then maybe a couple of units of 5 just to gain access to those additional Cabal points. But do remember, you lose access to the Cabal points if you lose the units, so there's definitely some give and take there, and in that situation, the protection of a larger squad does benefit you in some senses as well, so it's not necessarily one or the other in every situation. Now finally, we want to wrap up this list with one final unit being a fast attack choice. In this situation, we went with a unit of 2 Chaos Spawn, and while many Chaos Legions have access to Chaos Spawn, the Chaos Spawn within the Thousand Suns is especially effective. The Chaos Spawn cost 23 points each and have a nice movement profile of 7 inches, as well as a decent toughness of 5 and a 5+ normal save, as well as benefiting from the Armor of Contempt. And now one thing I want to mention about the Chaos Spawn is that their save is rather weak, so many different armies don't necessarily include them despite them being rather low cost and having a rather good profile. However, remember that Weavers of Fate psychic power that we had on the first squad of Rubric Marines. That can enable you to give your Chaos Spawn a 4+ invulnerable save, making them a lot more effective and a lot scarier to your opponent. In addition to that, the Thousand Suns have very solid troop choices with the Rubric Marines, as well as very powerful elites with the Scarab Cult Terminators. So the Chaos Spawn within the Thousand Suns tend to function as 2 different roles. Either you take a larger unit of them and use them as kind of an offensive unit with that 4+ invulnerable save and other psychic power buffs, or you just take them as individual Chaos Spawn for different purposes and just being annoying to your opponent by taking different table quarters and doing other such things within the game. Now with that being said, let's take a look at the offensive capabilities of the Chaos Spawn. Each Chaos Spawn has a rather weak weapon skill of 4+, but has a rather good attack profile with 2d3 attacks generated each turn. This means on average you'll be having 4 attacks per Chaos Spawn, which isn't bad, though you do have to remember that half of those attacks will miss. You're basically looking at 2 hits on average per Chaos Spawn. Those attacks will be coming in with their hideous mutations, which have a strength of 5, 2 armor penetration, and 2 damage per attack. Now on top of that, each time they're selected to fight, they gain an additional modifier to those attacks. This attribute comes from their Mutated Beyond Reason ability. This ability makes you roll a d3 and you generate a benefit based on the roll for the unit of Chaos Spawn that's chosen to fight. If you roll a 1, they have 4 armor penetration instead of 2. If you roll a 2, they have 3d3 attacks, meaning 6 on average, so essentially +2 attack per model, which is actually rather powerful, though it can be a little more or a little less. And if you roll a 3, they can re-roll the wound roll. All of these are actually rather powerful depending on the circumstance. However, being randomly selected does make them a little inconsistent. That being said, the Thousand Suns do have a special stratagem that allows them to take further advantage of the Chaos Spawn than other Chaos Forces do. The Thousand Suns have a special stratagem known as Fated Mutations. This stratagem costs 1 command point, and instead of randomly selecting the mutation, you just get to select which mutation they have. In addition to that, when generating the number of random attacks they have, you add 1 to the result of those attacks. So essentially you're getting +1 attack per Chaos Spawn, and you're getting to select whichever of those mutations is the best for you in that situation. This is incredibly powerful, so not only do you get the additional survivability from the different psychic powers, but you gain the increased consistency and output from this stratagem. So in all, the Chaos Spawn for the Thousand Suns are very impressive units. They also have the benefit of having an aura that says enemies within 6 inches of your chaos spawn have -1 leadership. This isn't the biggest thing, but it's a nice little perk to have. So let's take a look for the metrics of this list, and you'll see this list comes in at a total of 451 points, though you can buy some Legion commands on those Rubric Marines to eat up some additional points, bringing it more in line with that other list, though I'll let you select which Legion commands you want to pick on your own. In addition to that, instead of having the 4 Cabal points that require you to take a special Warlord trait like in the other list, this list comes with 7 Cabal points, giving you access to the majority of the Kabbalistic rituals and giving you a lot of different ability to make use of those Kabbalistic rituals as you so desire. As for dollar cost, it's not much different, coming in at $160, only $10 more than the Combat Patrol box. In this case, you'll be picking up 3 different kits, being a Demon Prince kit, a kit of 10 Rubric Marines, and a kit of Chaos Spawn. Inversely, there is one other way you can potentially build this list, and I'm not going to go too much into detail about it, but let's say you wanted to save a little bit more money, you could just pick up a box of Rubric Marines and a box of Scarab Cult Terminators, which together would run you $120, and then you can convert one of those Rubric Marines into an Exalted Sorcerer, use 9 of those Marines in a single squad, and then have a squad of 5 Scarab Cult Terminators. This would be a perfectly fine army, and it'll be pretty fun to play as well. You can then even buy some additional models to improve that list as you see fit, but I felt like these 2 lists would show the most variety, versus this 3rd list that just gives you basically power armor units, though if you like that kind of army, it's definitely a good option to go with. In any case, which list did you think is more interesting? The Combat Patrol list, or the second list that I suggested that you can build for pretty much the same price? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys think. And if you had to build a 500-point army list, what kind of 500-point army list would you build for the 1,000 Suns? Let me know in the comments down below. I do look forward to seeing them, as remember these are just suggestions and not 100% optimized ways of building a 1,000 Suns army. Anyways, as always, thank you for watching, and as always, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons. You guys are really awesome people and really do help support the channel. In addition to that, I would like to say, if you know anyone who may benefit from this content, please do share this video with them, as it not only helps the channel, but it also helps them out as well. And if you've enjoyed the content, do subscribe and like for future videos from this channel. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye.